The table was dressed in white linen and lit with flickering candles, all arranged beneath the low canopy of oak branches that arched over my parents' backyard. It was their 40th anniversary, and everything was curated down to the vintage silver and the jazz trio playing softly by the koi pond. I sat near the end of the table, same as always, just close enough to refill the wine, just far enough to be forgotten. Emma had already regaled the table with 3 stories, each one louder and more self-congratulatory than the last. Her boutique had been featured in a local lifestyle magazine. A musician had stopped by. A model wore one of her custom silk wraps on Instagram. Dad beamed. Mom nodded along, her smile stretched thin with effort. When dessert was served, some peach tart her assistant had picked up from a bakery I used to pay invoices for. Emma leaned forward and said it. "How does it feel?" she asked, raising her glass just high enough to make sure everyone was watching, being the most useless one here. A small ripple of laughter moved through the table like spilled champagne, quiet, sticky, and impossible to ignore. Dad's chuckle was deep and unbothered. Mom gave one of those closed-mouth smiles she uses when she doesn't want to seem complicit but doesn't plan to object either. Emma's husband smirked as if he'd heard the joke before. He probably had. I didn't look down. I didn't laugh. I just folded my hands in my lap, then placed them carefully on the table. My voice didn't rise above the music, but it cut through the evening like a cello string snapping. "How does it feel?" I asked, keeping my eyes steady on Emma, knowing the useless one won't be paying your bills anymore. The silence was immediate. Forks froze midair. Someone coughed. Emma's smirk broke, faltered, disappeared. I stood up slowly. The legs of my chair scraped sharply against the stone patio. No one stopped me. No one spoke. I turned toward the garden gate, the air thick behind me. I didn't wait for them to call after me. I knew they wouldn't. I walked past the koi pond, past the flickering lights and polished silver, and into the dark street beyond. My heels clicked against the pavement as I made my way home, each step steadier than the last. They didn't know it yet. But everything had already changed. I was 14 when I heard the panic in my mother's voice behind the kitchen door. It was the first time I understood money could hum like a warning in the walls of our house. Dad had lost a major client, and the mortgage was due. I had been working at Willow Books on weekends, shelving paperbacks and straightening display tables for $7 an hour. That night, I counted every dollar I had saved, $800 in total, and slipped the envelope onto my father's desk. He didn't say thank you. He called me reliable. The next month, Emma got a new convertible for her 18th birthday, a red one with a custom plate and white leather seats, the kind of car that turns heads even in Savannah's tourist traffic. She squealed when she saw it. My parents beamed. No one mentioned the envelope I'd left behind. By 17, I was taking extra shifts at a downtown cafe covering for students who needed weekends off. I gave Dad $500 for new drafting tools when he said his old set was barely holding together. He patted my head like I was the dog, then told Mom I was a walking trust fund. At 19, I was offered a partial scholarship to study art history in Florence. It was the first thing I'd wanted just for myself. I remember sitting on the back steps with the acceptance letter, rereading the words until they blurred. But Emma was behind on tuition again, something about unpaid fees and an apartment too expensive for her part-time gallery job. Dad sat me down in his office. "Family helps family, Lauren," he said with that heavy gaze he used to close a conversation before it began. I didn't fight. I transferred the $5,000 I had saved for Italy into an account linked to Emma's school. She graduated a year later with honors and a portfolio my parents framed. I graduated from a local state school, balancing night classes with 2 jobs. At Emma's wedding, I paid the deposit on the reception venue. When she opened her boutique, Magnolia Threads, I co-signed the loan and never saw the paperwork again. They called me helpful, practical, steady, but never by my name, and certainly never with thanks. It was a Tuesday night late enough that I'd already shut my laptop and brewed tea. I was in bed with a half-read book when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Emma's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Lauren, hey," she said, voice bright like we'd just spoken that morning. "I need a favor." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "The boutique is doing great. Really, it is. But there's this space next door I want to expand into. The bank's offering a line of credit, but they want a cosigner. Just $75,000. It's nothing, really. You're good with numbers. Can you help me make it happen? She said it like she was asking for a ride to the airport. I sat up. $75,000 isn't nothing, Emma. Oh, come on. She laughed lightly. You sit in that little apartment writing grant proposals all day? You've got investments. You don't even have kids or a mortgage. It's not like you're curing cancer. My throat tightened. No, I said. There was a pause. No, as in you won't help me? No, as in I won't co-sign a $75,000 loan for someone who hasn't repaid me for anything. The lightness vanished from her voice. You're being selfish. The word dropped like a match. I didn't argue. I ended the call. After the silence returned, I got out of bed and opened my laptop. I clicked through folders until I reached the one I'd named quietly without thinking. Records. It was locked. I typed in the password. Receipts, bank transfers, tax documents, tuition payments, business account top-ups, all traced back to me. I had scanned and saved every one year after year. At the bottom was a contract signed and notarized dated March 2015. I stared at the final line. Ownership stake 51%. Lauren Mitchell. She had cried the night she signed it, overwhelmed and desperate. The business was collapsing. I had liquidated nearly everything I had to keep her afloat. She signed without reading. I never reminded her. She didn't remember what she gave me, but I had never forgotten. The silence after my question didn't break. It buckled. I watched it fracture in their eyes one by one. Emma blinked rapidly, her expression contorting like she couldn't decide whether to be offended or confused. My mother's hand hovered midair, still holding her wine glass. My father cleared his throat, but the sound had no weight. No one moved. I didn't sit back down. Instead, I took one step forward, my voice quiet but clear. You want to know how I feel? I asked. Let me tell you. I turned my gaze on Emma first. The tuition you couldn't cover at Savannah College of Art and Design. That was me. The boutique's lease when your rent check bounced during lockdown. Me again. Payroll for your staff for 3 consecutive quarters. All covered. I looked at my parents. The down payment on your new roof, the orthodontist. The catered reception for Emma's wedding. I signed every check. I filled every gap. I kept quiet because I thought that's what family did, I said. I thought being useful was the same as being loved. I thought if I worked hard enough, gave enough, I'd earn a seat at this table. My mother looked down. My father finally spoke. That's enough, Lauren. I shook my head. It's not even close. I reached into my bag and placed a manila folder on the table. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Inside are documents proving I funded over $120,000 in expenses for this family since I was 16, including the contract that makes me majority owner of Magnolia Threads. Emma jolted upright. You're lying. I looked at her. You signed it. You were crying on the phone. Remember March 2015, I saved your business. You just forgot I was there. My father stood up, his jaw tight. You're humiliating your sister in front of everyone. No, I said, gathering my voice one final time. I'm done hiding what you chose not to see. I turned toward the gate. The candlelight behind me flickered restless. No one followed. No one called my name. By the time I reached the street, the air felt cooler, and for the first time, the weight wasn't mine. The morning after the dinner, I opened my banking app. My thumb hovered over the scheduled transfer, $2,500 withdrawn from my savings account on the first of every month like clockwork. It had started quietly back when Emma's boutique was barely covering utilities. I hadn't told her about it. She just assumed things had resolved on their own. I tapped cancel transfer. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure? I clicked yes. By the end of that week, the fallout arrived. First, it was a string of texts from Emma. Landlord called. Rent bounced. What's going on? Suppliers are freaking out. Are you late on something? Then the calls. Then the voicemails. each one more frantic than the last. By Friday night, I stopped checking my phone entirely. Saturday morning, the buzzer rang. I walked to the intercom, already knowing whose voice would be waiting on the other end. Lauren, Emma snapped. Open the door. My father's voice followed lower, but edged with command. We're not here to fight. We just need to talk. I buzzed them in. They entered like they still owned the place. Emma stormed past me into the living room, arms crossed. My father followed slower, his eyes scanning the space like he was looking for something to be disappointed in. You cut me off, Emma said. The boutique is a mess. My suppliers are threatening legal action. My landlord wants 2 months' rent immediately. You can't just... I did, I said, and I won't be restarting it. You don't get to just decide, she snapped. Not when we're this far in. I've been deciding it for years, I replied, walking calmly to the side table where I kept the folder. You just never noticed. I laid the leather-bound portfolio on the coffee table and opened it. Receipts wire transfers the loan agreement for the boutique bank records emails with her vendors. The contract with my 51% ownership notarized and dated. Everything you've built, I said, turning the pages slowly, has been quietly scaffolded by me. You can call me selfish, dramatic, whatever you want, but I'm done. My father leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing at the contract. This isn't how family works, Lauren, he said. We don't keep score. No, I replied. You just don't like when the math is out loud. They didn't speak for a moment. Then Emma grabbed the folder, scanning the pages like she was seeing my name for the first time. Her hands trembled, but she said nothing. You wanted me to fix it? I said, folding my arms. I just did. My father's voice sharpened as he stepped between me and the coffee table. This ends now, he said. You'll reinstate the payment. We can't afford this chaos. Lauren, you have the means. You will help your sister. He spoke like I was a child again, as if the years hadn't passed, as if I hadn't funded their peace for over a decade. As if obligation was my default setting. I already have, I said steady. I helped when Emma was crying to me night after night, when she thought her boutique was finished, when creditors were circling and she couldn't make payroll. I liquidated my investment portfolio. $60,000, my entire cushion. He blinked. Emma's head jerked back. You never said that, she spat. You didn't tell me. You didn't ask, I said. She turned to my father, eyes wide. I thought it was a short-term loan. You signed a contract, I said. You were desperate. I saved the business, Emma. And then I disappeared so you could pretend it was all you. Her jaw clenched. You didn't have to humiliate me. You didn't have to bring it up in front of everyone. I brought up the truth. You brought the humiliation the second you called me useless. My father raised his voice. This isn't about feelings. This is about unity, about protecting the family. No, I said, stepping closer. This is about power. You don't get to mock the person keeping the lights on. You don't get to call her selfish when she stops letting herself be drained. Emma laughed, bitter and brittle. So this is revenge, some pathetic play for control? No, I said softly. This is reclamation. For years I kept you afloat and let you pretend I didn't exist. I let you treat me like I owed you the air you breathe, but I don't. Not anymore. My father shook his head. You're tearing this family apart. I've been holding it together, I said quietly, invisibly. You only noticed me when I said no. Emma clutched the portfolio to her chest. Her silence was louder than her shouting ever was. When they left, I didn't follow them out. I closed the door gently behind them and stood there for a long moment, hands still on the knob. My voice had finally landed, and I knew exactly where it would echo next. The manila envelope arrived on a rainy morning, heavy in my mailbox, like it already knew what it carried. Inside was a lawsuit. Emma was suing me, claiming I had coerced her into signing over the boutique during a time of emotional vulnerability. Her attorney used phrases like undue influence and breach of trust. I didn't panic. I called Sarah, who gave me the name of a lawyer. She trusted Rachel Hayes. Rachel reviewed everything: my documents, the email chains, the wire transfers, the notarized contract. She didn't flinch. "This isn't a lawsuit," she said, flipping the last page. "It's a warning shot, and it won't land." The hearing came quickly. Emma showed up, polished lips pressed tight. My father sat beside her, arms folded, jaw locked. They didn't look at me. Her lawyer painted me as controlling, calculating, said I preyed on her desperation in 2015. Claimed I used business as leverage against family. Then Rachel stood. She didn't embellish. She showed them what I'd done. $60,000 wired from my account debt, negotiated landlord, appeased payroll, saved, all documented, all signed. This wasn't exploitation, she said. It was survival. And my client made it possible. The judge looked unimpressed with the theatrics. Motion to dismiss is granted. Just like that. Outside, the air was warm. Rachel told me I was free. But walking to my car, I realized something quieter had ended too. Not just the case, but the part of me that still expected them to care. After the judge's gavel fell, the silence came quickly. No one called. No one wrote. My mother didn't even send her usual vague holiday card with a photo of the backyard. For the first time in my adult life, I was entirely unaccounted for in my family's world. I thought it might hurt more. Instead, it felt like walking into a room I didn't realize I'd been locked out of. The absence didn't ache. It clarified. With the legal mess behind me, I returned to the easel I had pulled out weeks earlier. I bought better brushes. I mixed color without rushing. It didn't matter what I painted: landscapes, unfinished portraits. Sometimes just layers of red on top of green. It wasn't about creating something good. It was about feeling my hands do something that wasn't for anyone else. One morning, an email came from a woman I'd met years ago through a nonprofit grant. She was helping organize a regional women's leadership conference. The theme was resilience, rebuilding without permission. She said they wanted someone who could speak to setting boundaries with grace, someone who had walked away from something that had once defined her. They wanted me. I sat with the invitation for 2 days before responding. Then I wrote back, "Yes, I'll do it." And for the first time in a long time, I let my voice rise above the quiet. My birthday came on a Tuesday, quiet and unceremonious. I took the day off work, wandered the cobbled streets near the waterfront, and bought myself a slice of lemon cake from a bakery that didn't ask questions. No one called, no one from the family, at least. That evening, as the sun slipped low behind the live oaks, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Thinking of you. I miss my girl." 7 words. I stared at the screen for a long time, the message hovering like a hand halfway extended. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't acknowledgement. It was nostalgia, maybe, or regret, or an echo of something she once meant. Years ago, that message would have undone me. I would have taken it as a sign to soften, to reopen the doors I had just started to close. But not now. I set the phone back in my pocket without replying. The wind off the harbor was warm and clean. I passed the bookstore where I'd worked as a teenager, the one that smelled like old paper and lemon polish. The lights inside glowed gently through the windows, and for a second, I saw myself shelving paperbacks in the back corner, quiet, invisible, hopeful. But she wasn't me anymore. I kept walking past the shops, past the schoolhouse with its mural half-finished, past the wide porch of a house I used to imagine belonging to. The silence that followed me wasn't hollow this time. It was earned. The room was full of women, some in blazers, others in borrowed time. A soft murmur settled as I stepped behind the podium. The lights weren't harsh, but I could still feel the weight of being seen. I didn't bring notes. I just told the truth. For most of my life I believed value came from what you could carry for other people. Their debts, their dreams, their disappointments. I became the helper, the planner, the one who showed up when everyone else looked away. I let the silence hold. But the greatest thing I ever gave, I said slowly, was finally giving myself permission to say no. I told them about the loan. The years of silent giving, the night at the dinner table when I said the one thing no one expected from me, the truth. I didn't name names. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about weight and how good it felt to set it down. When I finished, the room was still. Then came applause, not loud, but real. A woman in the front row nodded with tears in her eyes. Another stood slowly like she was unfolding a truth inside herself. Afterward, they came to me with stories not about boutiques or money, but about boundaries and breaking points, about mothers, husbands, sisters, sons, about waking up. That night, I walked home under a sky wide with stars, my name tag still clipped to my blouse paint on my fingers from the canvas I'd worked on that morning. No more saving anyone from themselves. No more giving until I disappeared. I didn't become famous, I didn't become rich, but I became free. Lauren learns the power of reclaiming her worth by setting boundaries. For years, she silently funded her family's needs, believing self-sacrifice equaled love. Their dismissal, culminating in being called useless, forces her to confront this misconception. By refusing to continue enabling them and revealing her contributions, she asserts her value. The fallout, familial silence, and a dismissed lawsuit teaches her that her identity isn't tied to others' approval. Embracing her voice through painting and speaking at a conference, Lauren finds freedom in prioritizing herself, realizing true strength lies in saying no and living authentically.
The text came in while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my downtown office. Maya's message was characteristically blunt and unapologetic, as if selling someone else's property was as casual as borrowing a cup of sugar. Hey sis. Hope you're doing well in Chicago. I sold your old Honda to help with rent. Got $3,000 for it from Premium Auto Sales on 5th Street. Don't worry, I'll pay you back when I can. Thanks for understanding. Hugs and kisses. I stared at the message for a full minute, reading it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. My sister had just admitted to selling my car without permission, while I was away on a business trip. What Maya didn't know was that Premium Auto Sales wasn't just any dealership. It was my dealership. Part of a 7-location automotive empire I'd built over the past 8 years, starting with a single used car lot and growing into the largest independent dealer network in the tri-state area. She also didn't know that the old Honda she just sold was a 1994 Civic C that I'd been restoring as a passion project. To her, it was junk sitting in my driveway. To me, it was a $15,000 collector's item with a rebuilt engine and custom modifications. I called the dealership owner, myself. Premium Auto Sales, this is Marcus speaking. Marcus Williams was my general manager at the 5th Street location, a sharp guy in his 40s who'd been with me since the early days. Marcus, it's Victoria. I need you to pull up a transaction from today. Someone sold you a 1994 Honda Civic C. Let me check. Yeah, we had a woman come in around noon. Teal-colored Civic, manual transmission. Pretty clean for its age. Paid $3,500 for it. $3,500. Maya had told me $3,000, which meant she'd already skimmed $500 off the top. Marcus, I need you to reverse that transaction immediately. Reverse it? Is there a problem with the paperwork? The car was stolen. Stolen? But the woman had keys and registration. She's my sister. She took my car without permission while I'm out of town. Jesus, Victoria. I'm sorry, I had no idea. She seemed legitimate, had all the documents. It's not your fault. She's been using my spare key to move the car when she visits. But selling it crosses a line. What do you want me to do? Reverse the transaction and blacklist the seller, I instructed. Call the police and report it as receiving stolen property. I want this handled by the book. Are you sure? She is your sister. I'm sure. And Marcus? When the police ask for my statement, tell them I'll be flying back tonight to press charges. An hour later, police knocked on her door. I wasn't there to see it, but Maya called me screaming at 4:17 p.m. What did you do? She shrieked into the phone. I reported a theft. The police are here. They're saying I sold stolen property. Because you did. It's your stupid car. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family, Maya. I wasn't stealing. I was borrowing. You sold it. That's not borrowing, that's theft. I could hear voices in the background, probably the officers trying to calm her down. Victoria, please. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Was it? Because your text seemed pretty clear about your intentions. I needed the money for rent. You know I'm struggling. So get a job. I have a job. Working 10 hours a week at a coffee shop isn't a career, Maya. You're 28 years old. Not everyone can be a big shot like you. Big shot. If only she knew. Let me back up and explain how we got here, because this wasn't just about a car. This was about 8 years of watching my family take me for granted while I built something extraordinary right under their noses. When I graduated college with a business degree, everyone expected me to get a nice office job and settle down. Instead, I used my savings to buy a tiny used car lot on the outskirts of town. My family thought I'd lost my mind. "You're wasting your education," my mother had said. "Car sales is a man's business," my father had added. Maya had been the cruelest. "You're going to end up one of those desperate saleswomen in cheap suits begging people to buy junk." But I had a vision. I saw how inefficient the used car market was, how much room there was for someone who combined smart business practices with genuine customer service. I worked 18-hour days, learned everything about automotive repair and financing, and slowly built a reputation for honest dealing. The first year was brutal. I lived in a studio apartment, ate ramen noodles for dinner, and put every penny back into the business. My family's weekly check-ins always included some variation of, "Are you ready to give up this phase and get a real job yet?" By year 2, I'd hired 3 employees and moved to a bigger lot. My family still saw it as a cute hobby that would eventually run its course. Year 3 brought the first acquisition, a failing dealership across town that I bought for pennies on the dollar and turned profitable within 6 months. That's when I incorporated as Premium Automotive Group and started thinking bigger. Years 4 through 8 were a whirlwind of strategic growth. I identified underperforming dealerships, bought them cheap, implemented my systems, and watched profits soar. I also diversified into automotive financing, extended warranties, and fleet sales to corporate clients. By last month, Premium Automotive Group owned 7 dealerships, employed over 200 people, and generated annual revenue of $43 million. I personally owned 80% of the company, making my net worth just north of $12 million. But here's the thing, my family had no idea. To them, I was still Victoria who works at the car lot. They'd never asked about my business beyond polite small talk. They'd never visited any of my locations. When I bought my house in the suburbs, they assumed I'd gotten lucky with a loan. When I drove newer cars, they figured it was a dealer perk. Maya, in particular, had made a habit of treating me like her personal ATM. She'd call when she needed money for rent, for car repairs, for medical bills, for whatever crisis of the month she'd created. And I'd helped her every time because she was my sister. But I'd also been keeping track. Over the past 3 years, I'd given Maya approximately $18,000 in loans that she'd never paid back. I'd covered her security deposit on her apartment, her car insurance when she let it lapse, her credit card minimums when she was behind, and countless smaller emergencies. She treated my generosity like an entitlement, never expressing genuine gratitude, never making any effort to become financially independent. And now she'd crossed the line from borrowing to stealing. The phone was still in my hand, Maya still yelling on the other end. "Victoria, are you listening to me? The police want to arrest me." "Then maybe you shouldn't have committed a crime. I'll pay you back." "With what money? You just told me you needed $3,000 for rent." "I'll get the money somewhere." "Maya, do you have any idea what that car was worth?" "It's a 20-year-old Honda. It's a restored C with a rebuilt engine, custom suspension, and period-correct modifications. You sold a $15,000 collector's item for $3,000. Silence. $15,000? At least. Maybe more at auction." I didn't know. You didn't ask. You saw something you thought was worthless, so you stole it. "Victoria, please. I'll make this right." "How?" "You owe me $18,000 in unpaid loans, you just stole $15,000 worth of property, and you're facing criminal charges for receiving stolen property." $18,000? That's ridiculous. "I have records, Maya. Every loan, every payment I made on your behalf, every time you promised to pay me back and didn't. Those weren't loans. You're my sister. That's what family does." "No, Maya. Family doesn't take advantage of each other. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. I never lied to you. You told me you got $3,000 for the car. The dealership paid you $3,500. Another silence. That's different. Is it?" I could hear the police officers talking to her in the background, explaining her options. She was probably going to be arrested, which meant I needed to cut this conversation short and fly home to deal with the aftermath. Maya, I'm hanging up now. I suggest you call a lawyer. Victoria, wait. Don't do this. I'm your sister. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. I hung up and immediately called my assistant to book the next flight home. Then I called my lawyer to make sure we were handling everything correctly. Maya might be family, but business was business. The flight from Chicago to Denver gave me 3 hours to think about what I wanted to accomplish. Part of me was furious and wanted to throw the book at her. But part of me, the part that still remembered the little girl who used to follow me around asking for piggyback rides, wanted to find a way to help her learn from this without destroying her life. By the time I landed, I'd made my decision. Maya had been released on her own recognizance, pending charges. She was staying at my parents' house, probably crying and playing the victim. I drove straight there. My mother answered the door with red eyes and a defensive expression. Victoria, I think we need to talk. Yes, we do. She led me to the living room where Maya was curled up on the couch looking miserable. My father sat in his recliner, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Before anyone says anything, I began, I want to make something clear. Maya committed a crime. She stole my property and sold it. The fact that we're related doesn't change that. It was a misunderstanding, my mother protested. No, it wasn't. Maya knew exactly what she was doing. She needed money for rent. So do millions of other people. They don't steal from their families. Maya looked up at me with tear-stained cheeks. Victoria, I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't think. That's the problem, Maya. You never think. You just take. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked how I was doing before asking for money? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. When was the last time you offered to help me with anything? Nothing. When was the last time you even asked what I do for work? You sell cars. What else? I don't know. I pulled out my phone and showed her the Premium Automotive Group website. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the list of locations. You own all of these? I am Premium Automotive Group, Maya. I built this company from nothing while you all dismissed it as a phase. My parents were staring at the phone screen in shock. 7 dealerships? My father asked. 7 so far. I'm looking at 3 more acquisitions next year. But how? Hard work. Smart decisions. Taking risks. All the things you told me not to do. My mother sank into a chair. We had no idea. Biz, you never asked. You were all so convinced that I was wasting my life that you never bothered to find out what I was actually accomplishing. Maya was still staring at the phone. The dealership where I sold the car is mine. Which means you stole from me and then tried to sell my property back to me. Oh my God. The good news is that since I own the dealership, I can control how this gets handled. The bad news is that you've put me in an impossible position. What do you mean? I mean that if I don't press charges, I'm essentially telling my employees that it's okay to accept stolen merchandise as long as the thief is related to the boss. But if I do press charges, I'm sending my own sister to jail. Maya started crying again. Please don't send me to jail. I'll do anything. Anything. Yes. Get a real job. I have a job. 10 hours a week at a coffee shop isn't a job, it's a hobby. I'm talking about a 40-hour-a-week benefits and career path job. Doing what? I don't have any skills. Then develop some. Go back to school. Learn a trade. Start at the bottom somewhere and work your way up. But that will take years. Yes, it will. That's how careers work. She looked around the room as if searching for support from our parents. What about rent? What about my bills? What about them? I can't afford my apartment on an entry-level salary. Then move somewhere cheaper. Get a roommate. Live within your means. Victoria, my mother interrupted, surely you can help her transition. I've been helping her transition for 3 years, Mom. I've given her $18,000 and she's more dependent now than when we started. 18,000, my father repeated. Want to see the spreadsheet? Maya was looking increasingly panicked. Victoria, please. I know I messed up, but I can't just start over with nothing. You're not starting with nothing. You're starting with a clean slate, which is more than a lot of people get. But what if I can't find a job? Then you'll be motivated to try harder. What if I can't afford my apartment? Then you'll find a cheaper one. What if? Maya, stop. You're 28 years old. It's time to take responsibility for your own life. I stood up and pulled a business card from my wallet. This is my lawyer's number. Call him tomorrow. If you're willing to enter a formal repayment plan for the money you owe me, and if you can show me that you're actively looking for real employment, I'll consider dropping the criminal charges. What kind of repayment plan? $50 a month until the debt is paid off. That's 30 years at current levels. $50? That's nothing. It's something. And it's consistent. If you can stick to it for 6 months while holding down a real job, we can revisit the terms. And if I can't? Then you'll go to court and face whatever consequences the judge decides. Maya took the business card with shaking hands. Victoria, my mother said softly, don't you think you're being a little harsh? Mom, I've enabled Maya's irresponsible behavior for years. I thought I was helping her, but I was actually making it worse. This is me helping her for real. By threatening to put her in jail? By giving her consequences for her actions. For the first time in her adult life. My father cleared his throat. Victoria, we owe you an apology. For what? For not taking your business seriously. For not supporting your success. For not recognizing what you've accomplished. Thank you, Dad. That means something. How big is your company really? Last year we did $43 million in revenue. I employ over 200 people across 7 locations. By God. And I did it all while you were telling me to get a real job. Maya looked up from the business card. Victoria, I really am sorry. Not just about the car, but about everything. I never realized. Realized what? How much you've done for me. How much you've accomplished. How badly I've treated you. Maya, I don't need apologies. I need to see change. I'll change. I promise. Don't promise me. Prove it. Over the next 6 months, Maya did prove it. She got a job as a receptionist at a medical office, moved to a smaller apartment, and made every payment on time. She also started taking night classes in medical administration, working toward a certification that would open up better opportunities. The criminal charges were quietly dropped after she completed her first semester and made 6 consecutive payments. The car, which had been returned to me undamaged, went back to its place in my garage where it belonged. More importantly, our family dynamic shifted completely. My parents started asking about my business, visiting my dealerships, and introducing me to their friends as our daughter, the CEO. Maya began calling me for advice instead of money, sharing her career goals and asking for guidance on everything from resume writing to workplace politics. And when I acquired my 8th dealership the following year, expanding into luxury vehicles for the first time, my family was there for the grand opening. Maya even brought her boyfriend, who turned out to be a mechanic interested in classic car restoration. You know, she said as we watched customers browsing the showroom, I never thanked you for teaching me how to stand on my own 2 feet. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You saved my life by refusing to enable me anymore. You saved your own life by choosing to change. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you tell us how successful you were? We could have been celebrating your achievements instead of worrying about your choices. I thought about that for a moment. Because I needed to know that you loved me for who I was, not what I had accomplished. Money changes relationships, and I wanted to make sure ours was built on something real. And now I know that you respect me enough to take my advice even when it's hard to hear. That's worth more than any amount of money. Maya smiled and squeezed my arm. I'm proud to be your sister. I'm proud to be yours too. And for the first time in years, I meant it completely. 3 years later, Maya had been promoted to office manager at the medical practice and was engaged to the mechanic, who had opened his own restoration shop specializing in vintage Hondas. She'd paid off her debt to me 6 months early and was saving for a down payment on a house. My parents had become my biggest supporters, attending every business award ceremony and bragging about my success to anyone who would listen. They'd also started volunteering at a financial literacy nonprofit, teaching young adults about budgeting and responsible spending. And my 1994 Civic C? It was still in my garage, fully restored and occasionally driven on weekends. But now it represented something different than when Maya had sold it. It was no longer just a car I was working on in my spare time. It was a reminder that sometimes the people we love need us to be strong enough to let them fail so they can learn to succeed on their own terms. The best part was that Maya never again asked me for money. But she did ask if I wanted to go car shopping with her when she was ready to trade in her old Toyota. I want something reliable, she told me as we walked through the lot. Something I can afford on my own. Smart choice, I said. I learned from the best. And as I watched her negotiate her own deal, paying with her own money for a car she'd chosen herself, I realized that this was what real family success looked like. Not one person supporting everyone else, but everyone supporting each other by taking responsibility for their own lives. It had taken a stolen car and criminal charges to get us here, but we'd finally figured out how to be a real family instead of just people who happened to share the same last name. And that was worth more than all the dealerships in the world. The phone rang at exactly 2:17 a.m., jolting me from a deep sleep in my hotel suite in Tokyo. I was in the middle of closing a major real estate acquisition deal, and the last thing I expected was a call from my father. The caller ID showed his name and my stomach immediately tightened with worry. Dad? Is everything okay? Jessica, I have bad news. His voice carried that familiar tone of forced sympathy mixed with barely concealed satisfaction. Your apartment building is on fire. I'm watching it on the news right now. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. What? Which building? The Grandview Apartments on 5th Street. You know, where you live in that tiny studio. The whole thing is going up in flames. Fire department's been there for 2 hours. I reached for my laptop, quickly pulling up local news feeds. Sure enough, there it was. Live footage of the Grandview residential complex. Flames visible from several windows, fire trucks surrounding the building. Hope you have renter's insurance, Dad continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I knew so well. Though I doubt whatever you could afford would cover much. Maybe this is a sign that you should finally give up this independent living fantasy and move back home. I started laughing. Not a small chuckle, but genuine, uncontrollable laughter. Jessica? Why are you laughing at a tragedy? I tried to compose myself, but the irony was too overwhelming. Because Dad, that building wasn't just my home. What do you mean? I mean, I own it. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several long seconds. What did you just say? The Grandview residential complex. I bought it 18 months ago through Summit Property Holdings. I own the entire building, Dad. All 47 units. Another pause. That's impossible. You live in a studio apartment. You can barely afford rent. I live in the penthouse unit, which I renovated specifically for myself. And I've never had trouble affording rent because I've been paying it to myself. I could hear the confusion in Dad's voice. Jessica, this isn't funny. I'm trying to help you deal with a crisis. Dad, I'm looking at live feeds from 6 different news stations. The fire is contained to the 3rd and 4th floors and it's already under control. My building's sprinkler system and fire suppression technology are working exactly as designed. Your building. My building. Which is insured for $12 million, by the way. So yes, I definitely have insurance. The silence on Dad's end was deafening. I could practically hear his brain trying to process what I'd just told him. 12 million. He finally managed. That's just for the Grandview complex. My total real estate portfolio is worth about $420 million. This time the silence lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Dad? Are you still there? 400. Jessica, what are you talking about? You work in customer service at some tech company. I work in customer service for my own tech company. Summit Property Holdings and Summit Technologies. I founded both companies 6 years ago. I stood up and walked to the window of my hotel suite, looking out at the Tokyo skyline. In a few hours, I'd be signing papers that would add another $50 million worth of commercial properties to my portfolio. Dad, I think we need to talk. But first, let me handle the situation at my building. I opened my laptop and pulled up the emergency contact system I'd had installed in all my properties. Within minutes, I'd connected with the fire chief on scene, my property manager, and my insurance representative. Chief Morrison, this is Jessica Chin, owner of the Grandview complex. What's the situation? Ms. Chin, good to hear from you. The fire originated in Unit 3B due to a faulty space heater. Our suppression systems kicked in immediately, and we've contained the damage to Units 3B and 4A. No injuries and the rest of the building is secure. Excellent. What about the residents from the affected units? We've relocated them to temporary housing. Your property manager already activated the emergency housing protocol you established. Perfect. What's the estimated damage? Preliminary assessment suggests about $80,000 in damages. Nothing that can't be repaired within 2 weeks. $80,000. Dad was panicking about me losing everything, and the actual damage was less than what I'd spent on art for my penthouse. Thank you, Chief. Please keep me updated. I ended the call and realized Dad had been listening to the entire conversation. Jessica, he said quietly, who were you just talking to? The fire chief. Like I said, it's my building. When you own property, you get involved when there are emergencies. But how? When did you? I don't understand any of this. I settled back into bed, knowing this conversation was going to take a while. Dad, what exactly do you think I've been doing for the past 6 years? Working customer service, struggling to pay rent on that tiny apartment, refusing our help because you're too proud to admit you need it. The description stung because it was so far from reality, yet it reflected what my family genuinely believed about my life. Dad, I haven't struggled to pay rent in over 5 years. I bought my first property when I was 26 with money I made developing a customer service software platform. Customer service software? I noticed that most companies were using outdated, inefficient systems for managing customer interactions. So I developed an AI-enhanced platform that could handle multiple communication channels simultaneously while providing better service outcomes. I could hear him breathing but not speaking. That software is now used by about 4,000 companies worldwide. The licensing fees alone generate $15 million annually. $15 million? That was just the beginning. I used those profits to start buying undervalued properties, renovating them, and either selling or renting them at market rates. Each successful project funded larger acquisitions. But Jessica, you live so modestly. Your apartment, your car, your clothes. Dad, I live in a 2,000 square foot penthouse with a private rooftop garden. I drive a Tesla Model S and my clothes are custom made by a designer in Milan. That's impossible. We've seen your apartment. You've seen my guest bathroom and kitchen when you stopped by unannounced. I've never given you a full tour because every time you visit, you make comments about how I should give up and move home. The accusation hung in the air between us. We just want what's best for you, he said defensively. What you want is for me to fit your definition of success. When I chose tech over law school, you decided I was making a mistake. When I moved into my own place instead of staying home, you assumed I was struggling. You've never actually asked about my business or my life. But if you're so successful, why didn't you tell us? I tried to, Dad. Remember 3 years ago when I invited you and Mom to the Tech Innovation Awards ceremony? I was receiving an award for my customer service platform. You said it was some work party. I said it was a work event where I was being recognized for my achievements. You said you were too busy to attend some customer service appreciation dinner. I could hear him thinking, probably remembering that conversation differently than I did. What about when I offered to help with Mom's medical bills last year? You told me to focus on my own finances instead of trying to help with expenses I couldn't afford. Because we thought you were barely making ends meet. I was offering to pay $60,000 in medical bills, Dad. Did that not seem like a clue that maybe your assumptions about my finances were wrong? Another long silence. Jessica, if you have all this money, why do you live so normally? Because I learned from watching you and Mom that flashy displays of wealth often mask financial insecurity. I prefer to invest in assets that appreciate rather than liabilities that impress people. My phone chimed with a text from my property manager. Fire completely out. Damage minimal. All residents safely relocated. Building will be fully operational by Monday. Dad, I need to ask you something. When you called to tell me about the fire, you sounded almost pleased. Why? I wasn't pleased about the fire, Jessica. I was concerned about you. But you immediately jumped to telling me this was a sign I should give up and move home. That doesn't sound like concern. That sounds like you were hoping I'd fail. That's not. I just think you've been struggling for so long and maybe this would be the push you needed to accept help. Dad, I haven't needed help in years. But you've been so convinced that I'm failing that you can't see my success. I pulled up my portfolio on my laptop, taking screenshots of key properties and financial summaries. I'm going to send you some information. Property deeds, business registration documents, financial statements. I want you to understand what I've actually built. Jessica, you don't need to prove anything to me. Actually, I do. Because until you understand what my life really looks like, we can't have an honest relationship. I sent the files and waited while he presumably opened them on his end. Jesus Christ, he whispered. Jessica, these numbers, are these real? They're real. Summit Property Holdings owns 43 residential and commercial properties across 4 states. Summit Technologies has 12 software patents and licensing agreements with Fortune 500 companies. But how did you do all this without us knowing? You weren't paying attention. Every time I tried to share my success, you changed the subject or minimized it. Eventually I stopped trying. My hotel room phone rang, the front desk informing me that my car would be ready in 30 minutes for my meetings with the Tokyo property development firm. Dad, I have to go. I'm in Tokyo closing a deal that will add another $50 million to my portfolio. You're in Tokyo? How long have you been traveling for business? About 3 years regularly. This is my 4th trip to Asia this year. We thought you couldn't afford to travel. I take 6 to 8 international business trips annually. I just stopped telling you about them because you always responded with concerns about me spending money I supposedly didn't have. I could hear multiple voices in the background on Dad's end. Is that Mom? I asked. She woke up when I was watching the news. Jessica, she's going to want to talk to you. Put her on speaker. Jessica, honey? Mom's voice came through, thick with sleep and confusion. Your father's been telling me the strangest things about buildings and businesses. Hi, Mom. Dad's telling you the truth. I own the building that was on fire tonight, along with 42 other properties. But sweetheart, that doesn't make sense. You work in customer service. I own a customer service technology company that serves 4,000 businesses worldwide. 4,000. Mom, remember when you were worried about my health insurance last year? I wasn't unemployed. I have premium medical coverage through my companies, plus additional coverage for international travel. But you said you were between jobs. I said I was transitioning between projects. You assumed that meant I was unemployed. I heard Mom whisper to Dad, "Show me those papers you were looking at." Several minutes passed while they reviewed the documents I'd sent. Jessica, Mom said finally, these bank statements, are you really worth? About $260 million in liquid assets, plus property holdings worth approximately $420 million. So yes, I'm doing okay financially. By God, Dad breathed. Jessica, you're successful. I'm successful, Dad. I have been for years. But why didn't you tell us? I tried. But every conversation became about your concerns for my financial security or suggestions that I should move home and get a real job. Mom spoke up. Honey, we were just worried about you living alone, working so hard. Mom, I have a full staff. Property managers, accountants, legal team, technology developers. I haven't worked alone in 4 years. A staff. 37 employees across both companies. The silence stretched again as they processed this information. Jessica, Dad said slowly, when you offered to help with Mom's medical bills. I was offering to pay them outright. $60,000 wouldn't have affected my budget at all. And when we said you should focus on your own expenses. You were telling a multimillionaire to stop trying to help her family because she needed to worry about her own rent money. I heard Mom start crying. Oh, sweetheart, we've been such fools. You weren't fools. You made assumptions based on limited information and your own fears about my choices. But we should have listened better, Dad said. We should have asked more questions instead of assuming we knew what was happening in your life. My phone buzzed with a text. Car ready downstairs for Sakura development meeting. I really do have to go. But when I get back from Tokyo, I'd like to take you both to dinner. Somewhere nice. My treat. Jessica, Dad said, about the fire tonight. The fire is handled. Insurance will cover everything, residents are safely housed, and the building will be fully operational by Monday. And you're really okay? Dad, I'm more than okay. I'm successful, independent, and happy with what I've built. We're proud of you, Mom said, her voice still shaky. We should have said that years ago. Thanks, Mom. That means a lot. After ending the call, I gathered my materials for the Tokyo meetings, thinking about the strange turn the night had taken. What began as my father calling to deliver bad news about a tragedy had become the moment my family finally learned the truth about my life. The irony wasn't lost on me that it took a fire for them to finally see clearly. 3 days later, I returned from Tokyo with signed contracts for a major commercial development project. The Grandview fire damage had been completely repaired, and all residents were back in their units. But more importantly, I had plans to have dinner with my parents for the first time in 2 years. I picked them up in my Tesla, watching their faces as they took in the car's features and technology. "This is beautiful, Jessica," Mom said, running her hand along the leather seats. "How long have you had it?" "About 18 months. It's actually my second Tesla. I traded up when the new model came out." We drove to Lumiere, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Dad's eyes widened when we pulled up to the valet stand. "Jessica, this place is very expensive." "Dad, I made $3.2 million in Tokyo this week. I think I can handle dinner." The maitre d' greeted me by name and led us to my usual table, a private booth with a view of the city skyline. "Miss Chin, so wonderful to see you again. Will you be having your usual?" "Thank you, Henri. We'll start with a bottle of the 2015 Bordeaux, and then I'll let my parents choose their own meals." After Henri left, Dad leaned forward. "You have a usual table here?" "I do a lot of business entertaining. This is convenient for client dinners." Mom picked up the menu and immediately set it down. "Jessica, these prices are exactly what I expected to pay. Order whatever you want." As we settled into dinner, the conversation gradually shifted from amazement about my success to genuine curiosity about my life and work. "Tell us about Tokyo," Dad said. "What kind of deal were you working on?" "Commercial real estate development. I'm partnering with a Japanese firm to build a mixed-use complex in downtown Osaka. Residential units, office space, and retail." "That sounds incredibly complex." "It is. But that's what makes it interesting. Plus, the profit margin on international development is substantially higher than domestic projects." Mom smiled. "You sound so confident when you talk about business. I remember when you were little, you used to reorganize your toys like you were running a company." "Some things never change. I just reorganize buildings now instead of toys." Dad reached across the table and took my hand. "Jessica, I owe you an apology. Not just for tonight but for years of not seeing what you were accomplishing." "Dad, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. I was so focused on what I thought your life should look like that I completely missed what your life actually looked like." "We both did," Mom added. "We've been treating our successful daughter like she needed our help, when she's been more successful than we ever imagined." I squeezed Dad's hand. "I appreciate that. But I need you both to understand something. I didn't build this empire to prove you wrong or to show off. I built it because I saw opportunities and had the skills to capitalize on them. And we're incredibly proud of what you've built," Dad said. "I just wish we'd been supporting you instead of doubting you." "You can support me now," I replied. "By asking about my life instead of assuming you know what's happening in it." "Deal," Mom said immediately. "In fact, I want to know everything. Start from the beginning and tell us how you built all of this." So I did. Over the course of a 3-hour dinner, I walked them through every major decision, every key investment, every pivotal moment that had led to where I was today. They listened with fascination, asking questions and expressing amazement at the scope of what I'd accomplished. "The customer service software was just the foundation," I explained. "But real estate is where I found my passion. There's something satisfying about taking a rundown building and transforming it into something beautiful and functional." "Like the Grandview complex?" Dad asked. "Exactly. When I bought it, half the units were vacant and the building was falling apart. I spent 8 months completely renovating it, improving the infrastructure, adding modern amenities. Now it's one of the most desirable residential buildings in the area." "And the penthouse where you live?" "I designed it myself. 2,000 square feet, floor-to-ceiling windows, a private rooftop garden, and a home office that overlooks the city." Mom shook her head in amazement. "We thought you were living in a tiny studio." "You thought that because I never invited you over. Every time you visited, you made comments about me needing to move home or get a better job. It was easier to let you see just the kitchen and bathroom than to deal with lectures about responsible living." "We won't do that anymore," Dad promised. "In fact, we'd love to see your real home sometime." "I'd like that. Maybe this weekend." As we finished dinner and prepared to leave, Dad looked around the elegant restaurant one more time. "Jessica, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Are you happy? With all of this success, all these businesses, are you fulfilled?" I considered the question carefully. "I am. I love what I do, I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm excited about future projects. The only thing that's been missing is being able to share it with family. Well, that changes now, Mom said firmly. We want to be part of your life, your real life. I'd like that very much. As I drove them home, Dad spoke up from the passenger seat. Jessica, about that fire call. What about it? I realize now that I was calling to deliver bad news to someone I thought couldn't handle bad news. But you handled it like a CEO handling a minor business inconvenience. Because that's exactly what it was. I'm proud of who you've become, he said quietly. And I'm sorry it took a fire for me to finally see it. Dad, sometimes it takes a crisis to illuminate the truth. But what matters is that we're finally seeing each other clearly. A week later, I gave my parents a complete tour of the Grandview penthouse, my office building, and 3 of my other residential properties. They met my property managers, my chief technology officer, and my head of acquisitions. Your daughter, my CTO told them, is one of the most innovative minds in technology and real estate. We're lucky to work for her. Dad beamed with pride. We're just beginning to understand how lucky we are to be her parents. That evening, as we sat on my rooftop garden watching the sunset over the city, Mom asked one final question. Jessica, what's next? What's your next big goal? I smiled, looking out at the skyline where several of my buildings were visible in the distance. International expansion. I'm looking at opportunities in London, Sydney, and Singapore. The goal is to have Summit Holdings operating on 4 continents within 5 years. That sounds amazing, Dad said. And this time we want to hear about every step of the journey. I'd like that, I replied. It's much better when you have family cheering you on instead of worrying about you. Sometimes it takes a fire to light the way to truth. In my case, it lit the way to a better relationship with the people who matter most.